righty, it is time for Jason's thoughts, and I'm super stoked for today's meetup. I have Hassan with me, joining the vlog. So welcome, Hassan.
Pleasure to be here, Jason. Thanks for inviting me, man. I've been a long time watcher, first time attendee, so really excited to be here.
Yeah, yeah, I appreciate you taking the time and just to meet up with me. And even before you'd watched some vlogs and given me some content, which I unpacked with another friend of mine. So it was super cool. Always appreciate the feedback, but like forget leaving comments and talking about it. Let's get you on and let's get going. So I think for our viewers, all 56 of my subscribers, I think it's a great place to start is just a little bit of a meet and greet on how you and I have met. Because I mean, it's been what, maybe 8 or 9 months. Never met you in person ever.
Ever.
Met you virtually. I can't even recall it. It was some kind of meeting maybe I was presenting in front of.
Yeah, it was. I think our origin story is one of the coolest and one of the most special ones I cherish at least. It was just a big round table, and it was I think the first time we came into contact with you, and you were presenting, and I don't even think I said two words in that meeting, but we ended up connecting after, and it was phenomenal. I mean, I'll let you take it away on that, on to sort of like I'd love to get your perspective actually, and then I'll share
Yeah,
mine.
yeah, I think points of view for sure. For me, yeah, I've presented in front of a lot of different groups, and I think in this case I was definitely new in my role and was new to your group. But for me, you stuck out. That was just there's certain things even in a virtual world where you can see and sense a person, and I just knew you were like that's that's a guy that gets stuff done. He's a hustler in all the right ways, and just a really great aura about you, and your engagement was super high. So it was like, okay, I see the guy in the crowd that's going to be my cheerleader, and but I knew there was much more behind it than that, and so I'm glad we connected. Just I can't remember if it was through chats after the meeting, probably through chats, and then just kept on connecting, and yeah, it's super cool, right? Really, really cool. Even though we don't work in the same group, we've still been able to connect.
Honestly, I don't know about Hassan and get things, and I'm certain any viewer on this call like, oh, do you have the right Hassan on podcast? Oh man, but likewise, man. Coming like, and we'll lean into this kind of as we talk about jobs to careers. But I've met
Yeah.
different people of different walks of life, and sometimes when you meet somebody who's veteran in their role and super passionate and knows what they're talking about and has a very calm aura about them, I immediately gravitate to such people. So when you were presenting, you were very different in relation to the way other people present. And when I say that, other people have very great professional demeanor, very structured, but you were very fluidic, and it was really just it was appealing to the ear. Like I wanted to hear what was next, what's in the next slide, even though I had no idea what the overall space was. And when you said, "Hey, Hassan, let's connect after a call," and it meant the world to me. Like, whoa, like, the Jason wants to talk to me. I was like, I'm a nobody, and to be able to keep
uh,
up as we are, and I truly and from my heart of hearts consider you a friend. And whenever I'm up by your neck of the woods, I'd love to truly meet you. But yeah, man, it was I think one of the most cool origin stories ever. Just two people who respected one another, and just to be at this space now, it's a privilege for sure.
oh man, yeah, I honored, and uh, yeah, I think it is really special, especially in a virtual world where um, we didn't have that face to face, but and so and I think it's tough sometimes to build connections in a virtual world, but I would say absolutely, I can't wait for us eventually to connect face to face, you'll be like, Jason, you're so short. And I'll be like, Hassan, you're so tall, or something will catch us off guard because only seen this much of us. But I can't wait for that day. And just, it's been awesome to get to know you from afar. And again, like, we're not talking, we talk every day. We're not talking every week, it's just here and there and just check-ins, making sure we're good. We've both gone through some job changes, and I think those connections are important. And
Yep.
so, yeah, it's really, really awesome. So there we have it. So, again, awesome to have you on. Super excited. Now, we were throwing around some topics, and kind of feel like we landed on the jobs to careers. Where you kind of jump into a job and maybe not thinking that deeply on it. It's just like, oh, I got a new job, right? But
Hmm.
that real shift. I'd love to know kind of your experiences where that job kind of goes above to that career, right? Like, what defines it? So, would love to kick it off with kind of your thoughts around that, and maybe some of your experiences, and where you've had that happen to you.
Sure. Oh man, it's so crazy. Sharing Hassan's thoughts on Jason's thoughts. I mean, I'm just here we are. Truth be told, Jason, I actually dedicate this topic to Chris Rock. If Chris Rock, if you ever coming across this podcast, shouts out. I was a huge stand-up comedy fan, and I remember he did this one hilarious bit on jobs versus careers. And he said that he used to work at this restaurant, and that was his job. And he's like, when you have a job, so let me inverse it. When you have a career, there aren't enough hours in the day. Like you get look at your
Mm.
watch. Oh my God, it's already 5 o'clock. Like where'd the time go? And you're thinking about the next day. When you're working a job, there's too many hours in the day. Like you play the game to run the clock down. Like yeah, he used to play this game where he'd like scrub plates. And it's like, you know what? I'm not gonna look at the clock. And he's just scraping, scraping, scraping. And it's like, you know what? I'm gonna give it a little bit more, and looks at the clock, 15 minutes, and just his day would just drag. And so I think that was a
Yeah.
really indicative point between jobs to careers on a base level, and I can
Yeah.
finally say I relate to that space, finally being in a space of my career. Um, I treated careers the way I treated my academic career as well, where I wasn't one of those people who knew what he wanted to be, but I knew what I
Mm.
didn't like, and I kind of used that as my filter through life. And being in this day and age, it's what a blessing. I mean, if this was 1500 years ago, that your career was hunter, gatherer, or soldier, right? You didn't have any options. Like who's a brand coordinator in that world, right? But when you come into this day and age, it's like when you start to go through what do I not like, it still leaves thousands and thousands of opportunities and vocations. So I started my career in sales. You know what? I'm lying to your face. I started my career doing lawn care work. I
There
was
we go.
I was mowing someone's lawn. I'd never done lawn care in my entire life. Like this was 2015. I was ready to go to university, and I hadn't worked a job up until that point. I was so busy doing extracurriculars and wrestling and football that I didn't really think about a job until university. Summertime rolls around and I'm just shoveling dirt to my lawn. That's the extent of my gardening. And one lady was like, "Hey, I own this facility and we need a gardener and we'll pay you 15 bucks an hour." Bear in mind, minimum wage then was 11.25. So I thought I land at the end of the rainbow, jackpot. And so
Big
he
time.
gives me a lawnmower, and I've never used a lawnmower in my entire life. And now there's a gas gauge and a battery gauge, and I put gas in the battery gauge, and I'm letting it run and run. And just the lawnmower blew up. And the guy like apologized. He said I should have trained you. Kept me on the entire summer. My last shift, he's like, "Hey, just rip out some weeds and you're done." And so I'm like, I'm gonna do the best job I can here, ripping weeds. And then the last weed I ripped out said tulips for 29.99. Like the tag was on there. They were about to bloom, but I thought they were weeds. so that so that was job number one under the Hassan Ali books. It is not on my LinkedIn anywhere. It's not on my resume. So good luck finding that one. But
Yeah.
then I found myself doing some warehouse work, and I remember I landed my first big gig doing customer service and sales. And I didn't quite care for the quotas, but I cared for about helping people and connecting with people and just chatting. And so you start adding elements there. And now I'm in a place where my job is so dynamic, it gets to hit all of my passions. I remember when I was in university, I went to school for communications, and then when I dropped out, I went to school for marketing. But one thing I always wanted to do was theater and film, work in production, doing all these
Ah,
things. So it's
yeah.
all these different elements, right? Like I've always wanted to be behind camera, but it was a pipe dream. I was like, one day I'll be Peter Jackson doing the next Lord of the Rings. But you know that that was the dream. And then one day I would see people working with like the latest tech. So I was like, I'd love to work for these great tech companies and do like a big demo on screen, like a TED talk, and do all. And so all these things, what's felt like pipe dreams, became more and more of a reality. The more I started filtering on and honing in, and what's my career, and what do I like to do, and what do I like to see, and how can I get there? And now I'm blessed
Yeah.
to be in a career where I touch different things, where I get to talk to people, I get to be behind camera, I get to do all these things, and I'm happy to say there aren't enough hours in the day to do the job that I love. So that's Hassan's
That's
job to career.
Yeah, that is I like the analogy with Chris Rock there too, because you're absolutely right. Like, career jobs can be stressful, and they can have real moments of heaviness and lots of long hours. But when you really love what you do, it doesn't really you're not looking at the clock, right? You're not punching in and out and like, okay, I can't wait for 5 o'clock. Like, and so that's important for sure. So, before I share a little bit of my history and my thoughts with it too. Do you think that, like, because so for me, I didn't go to school. As I shared, I went to school for art. And the only famous and rich artists that I knew at the time were mostly dead. So I didn't think that was the greatest career path. But for you, kind of going into school, post secondary, like university and stuff like that, is that what kind of triggered like my next step is like a career job? Or were you still kind of like getting jobs and seeing if that feeling of career path came after?
It's funny when it comes to my academics, I had a saying, C's get degrees. So I was not, I was definitely not an academically inclined student. There was a lot of
Ah,
theories and things that I loved, but there was nothing, I remember there's one lecture, and it was like a tenth of a lecture where someone talked about PR and the way they kind of dress. I'm like, oh, it would be cool to get a career in that somewhere down the road, but nothing that enraged such a passion that I need to get from here to here to here.
yeah.
What actually interested me in a career in brand was I was working in sales, and there's one guy that just kind of came by, and he was like, hey, yeah, I do this, and I was like, wow, interesting. And when you work in sales, you talk to different people of different
Yep.
backgrounds. I'm like, what do you do all day? And one guy's like, oh, I do trade shows. I fly around the world and I talk about this. One guy I met used to work for Harley Davidson, and his whole job was going to trade shows and showing off the latest bike. And I'm not even
Nice.
a motorcycle guy, like not to that extent. But I was like, I
Yeah.
would love to do that, something crazy, unveiling it, talking about it. And so I came across this one posting. It was for another company, and it was called Assistant Brand Manager. And I had no qualifications to apply for this role, but they gave me an interview anyway. I didn't finish
Nice.
school. I only had a sales role. I tanked my interview, so we all know it didn't work out. But when I looked at the job description and I looked at this like pay scale, everything, that was the first time it hit me as like, this is now what I want. But it came from not necessarily academics, but more so talking to different people and what they do. And then when I finally looked at it, like one person told me, and I think I was what 8 years old at the time. I was saying that I wanted to become a what was it? Graphic designer. I was a huge video game nut, so I was like, yeah,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
love
yeah.
video games. And he's like, do you know what graphic design actually is? It is coding. I don't know why he was trying to discourage an 8-year-old. I mean, I'm not sure if he had a bad day at work, but he told me was whenever you have a job or something you fancy, always be mindful of grunt work. Work that's going to make you a
Mm,
grunt, but that's going to get you there. And when I looked
yeah,
at this posting for assistant brand manager and like the career paths that can potentially lead there, none of it looked like grunt work. It just looked like work that I would enjoy doing in my day to day. And once I get
yeah,
there, this would be an even cooler thing. So, yeah, sorry, long winded answer, but that
yeah.
was kind of how I fell into this is something I'd like to be doing.
Yeah, yeah, that's cool. That's really, really cool. Yeah, I was curious because, to me, again, not really going to university, um, you know, I felt like looking from the outside in, I had friends that were, going to university and they were coming out with degrees, and then they went right into that career job, right? And so I felt, back then I was really nervous because I'm like, what am I gonna do? Like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. And so I thought, potentially that the thought process is just a little bit different for some when you go through university, and you just know, okay, well, I'm gonna be a doctor, I'm gonna be a lawyer, I'm gonna be marketing or whatever. Like, you put in your years, you punch out the ticket, and then you're into your career. And I think that's where, for me, it was really, really harder to define, right? Like, similar to you, I wasn't plucking out weeds or flowers in your case, but I usual stuff, right? Like, I had this art, careers class when I was in, like, this is going way back into grade 12. And I knew I was trying to drive at, like, being a comic book artist, right? So I was trying to fudge this test we had to take, and I ended up getting posted in a trophy shop. So I was making, like, ribbons and trophies, and, like, playing with all these chemicals to change things from gold to silver. I'm sure was not healthy at all, but that's kind of where I started. And then, my boss at the time was just like, yeah, this could be your path. And I'm like, man, I'm working in a dungeon, literally in a basement, underground, no windows, and this machines, air compressors, all this stuff, right? Uh, so then I was out of there after a year, but moved into the gas station world, right? I was pumping gas, and I became an assistant manager and a manager, like, relatively quickly for my age. And then it was like, okay, again, not seeing a career. I wasn't going to buy my own gas station or anything like that, which the owners owned. And then I moved out of the province and moved to Alberta, which was, like, at the time, was like hot oil field kind of life. And I was like, yeah, I'm gonna go make like $30 an hour. Literally go to get some information, learned I could die, and I was like out. I didn't even finish the application process. I'm like, they're hiring thousands of people, and I'm like, I could die. Like, no, I'm out. So, again, searching. Worked at like Canadian Tire, worked at like an old video store. Again, dating me, right? It's like, when you went to buy, rent your movies. And then, I got lucky, by fluke. My dad was visiting me, and he was like, hey, did you know there's like this super cool electronics store, like 3 blocks from your house? And it was like, they sell CDs and all the consumer electronics. And I was like, no, I didn't know it was there. And he's like, oh, you should go apply there. You knew I was kind of just doing jobs. And so that was, like you, kind of my first taste of sales. I didn't start in sales. I started in, like, shipping, receiving, and till. Like, but I had a natural gift to gab, and I was starting to progress out behind the till and start helping out customers on the sales floor. And then I moved back to Vancouver Island, and was looking to stay with this company, and they're like, let's interview for a sales job. And I was like, oh my god, I don't know how to sell, man. Okay. And I ended up getting this job in car audio sales. Again, didn't know anything about car audio, 12 volt. But I stayed there for like 5 years and became a supervisor, and I was running my sales floor, and it felt pretty good. Um, but then my team started leaving and going, this is a dying industry. Because, at the time, cars were becoming amplified systems, and they were, stereos were harder to pull out because they were connected with airbags and things like that. Stuff started going a little different. And I was really immature too. Like, I'm not afraid to admit it. Like that job, I was a silly clown. Like, if I could rip out someone's back seat and put two 18-inch subwoofers into their Accord, as long as they were cool with it, I was gonna do it, right? Um, and but my team was like, it was a small group, but they were like, yeah, I think we need to go into cellular, and I'm like, no, it's like little stupid things, and I'm like, that's not fun. Like I'm building big stereos, like Fast and Furious, man. Like we're living it, right? It was like in screens, drop downs, like super cool stuff, and they left, and they left me behind, and it was like, huh. And then they came back and said, hey, it's a bit, it's pretty good over here, actually. I was making straight commission, $0 to my name every single month. So craft dinner for dinner, the first of the month, and hopefully by the end of the month, it was steaks at the keg. But long story short, I jumped with them, and it wasn't, again, that career aspiration, thinking that this is the career over there. I started working for this mobile company and selling little cell phones, like, and this is again like 20 years ago, so it was like T9 predictive text, barely had flip phones, 1-inch screens. Most of them were not color. Um, and it was like 30 hours a week, part time, working in a kiosk. And like, I was freaking out. And then I got my first paycheck, and I'm like, oh, this is good money. and and so I stayed around, and it got comfortable, and started getting good. But again, like, 6 months passed, maybe 9 months, and this is where it shifted for me. And it was one, I would probably deem him as a mentor, at least someone that I respected within the organization. That was like, dude, I need to take you aside. And I'm like, okay. He's like, come with me. He's like, first, we're gonna go buy you a new pair of shoes, because those are stupid. And they truly were. They were like, like really worn and like beat up. And he's like, you need good shoes. So he convinced me to somehow buy like $200 pair of shoes. Right? It was just like, okay. And then we went to the food court, and he's like, man, he's like, you could make a good run at this. And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, what's your goals? Like, what do you want to do in life? And I'm like, have fun, just
Honestly.
money. I don't know. He's like, like what holds you back? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what I'm shooting for. I don't know. And so it was a pivotal moment, because he's like, look, I want to take you under my wing. Um, you know, I think you could make a run at like being a leader. Like, and I'm like, okay, cool. He's like, like, let's see if we can get you assistant manager of a store, and then take it from there. Um, and so that was like the defining moment for me, because I again, I was really immature. I didn't necessarily look beyond the week or the month. And it was his guidance that really kind of like opened up the wall, like the windows. Like, here's a company it's new in the West Coast, or in the West, and it was growing exponentially. There was stores opening all the time, and I think I would have just stayed there and put my head down and just kept selling these little phones, and not really looked any further, um, beyond that, if you hadn't sat me down. And so, even and so I think, as a system manager, I was still a little bit of a goof. I mean, I just had a kid, and so I was still, very focused there. But then I had this moment of, you know a job opening for my own store, and being a leader of my own store, and I wasn't even going to apply. And then, again, my mentor comes back and says, you got to go for it, man. And I'm like, dude, I just had a kid. I'm still pretty dumb. I'm immature. And I'm like, I don't know how to do it. And he's like, nobody knows how to do it. Like, you just got to get in there, and then you'll figure it out. Then you'll learn. And that first time walking in the store, was a brand new store. First time meeting up with contractors, unlocking the door. that was the moment. That was my moment of like, I've made it. And- but not so much as like, and I think I could have done that job forever. I loved being a store manager. I loved driving sales and supporting a team. It was a small team. Um, but I really went and said, like, I looked at it and I went, man, I can really enjoy this and call this my career proudly. Like this is something that I can really get behind. And, you know, and it's never done me wrong. Like 20 years later with the same organization, I'm very fortunate to be, in the role that I am now, and leading a bigger team. I've got a team of about 40 now. I've had teams of about 70 or 80, but it morphed, and maybe along with my maturity, to go from that job to like a career and just stick with it. And I have loved it ever since. As long as I'm dealing with people, as you have that, we have that common trait of dealing with people or working with people, supporting people, leading people. I'm not done yet. I still got a couple of years before retirement, but I can safely say that I found my career, and maybe lucky in some regard, but it's really worked out for me, and just I've never looked back, and I just keep looking forward, and the years keep flying by, and that's it for me. I'm career set.
There are so many things you said that I could spend hours getting into, and I actually do want to touch on as many of them in a rapid fire fashion as possible. So one of
Nice.
the things you mentioned, in sort of your art career, sort of being in the dungeon, you mentioned like working with chemicals turning gold to silver, like alchemy. Was that like your comic book characters in this, or you were trying to
That
do
was
this?
no. It is a thing with trophies. You can literally take a gold statue and dip it into some very questionable chemicals, and it comes out silver. Yeah.
That is
Not I
insane to me.
Hopefully not the same anymore, many, many moons ago, but yes.
Jason, man, it's funny. We can touch on resumes later in terms of how that kind of looks. But if it was me, I remember I'd always like to uh, dress up the resume as much as possible. So if you were a cleaner, you were a sanitation expert.
Yes.
If I was a
Yeah.
lawn care provider, I was like a field surveyor testing the
There you
quality of the
go.
earth and the geo. So if it was you, I would have written alchemist.
If I go back that far on my resume, whenever I need it, that is the route I will go. I'll take
Oh,
you up
I
on that
got you. You mentioned how one thing you said really stuck out to me was like you were in elements where you were commission only, where there's no base,
one.
and it was like I laughed so hard when you said it internally when you were like, "Oh, start of the month steak, end of the month steak, somewhere everywhere in the middle was this," and it
Yeah.
brings me back to those days. And Friday's payday, and then Monday is God help me day. You don't know what happened. You know what happened in between. And you mentioned, oh, I'm so sorry, I was going somewhere with that. Sorry, so you were mentioning the commission environment. So
Yeah.
your assets were fluctuating, but then you were exploring of where's the real good money at. And I think every boy, like that's overgenerous, but speaking as a male, it's like, man, let's check out the military, man. Like they pay
Yeah.
you well, and like housing's covered, dude. It's a sweet gig. Or hey, let's check out the
Yep.
oil sands. Like to your point, make 30 an hour, 40 an hour, and dude, we're
Yep.
living. And when you look at like the reality of it, you realize that's like the first indication of, money really isn't like, like unless this is
Yeah.
my passion to be on the front lines and serve my country in this way, this isn't
Yeah.
quite the job for me. And I can
Yeah.
definitely relate to that because just before I landed where I was, two companies before, I was actually applying to be a correctional officer. Yeah, man. I
Wow.
wanted
Yep.
to go to the
Yep.
RCMP because I loved Lord of the Rings and horseback riding. So I was like, that's sick. The only career where I can ride a horse. I wrestled with a bunch of guys who became cops. So I was like, it'd be great to put that in there. And I was like, I think corrections would be a great way to go. And
Yeah.
I got through, I think 85% of like the way through. And it was very close to being corrections. And someone corrected my career path. They're like, listen, man, this is really what you want to be doing, man. Like, this is like here in, when you go to corrections, great career, great vocation, but this is you go here and you talk to people, and there's less and less people to talk to the way you go here. At least not in a social, it's not a social environment to be in a correction facility.
True,
But it just what you
true.
mentioned about like the oil sands and like just trying to go out there, it really stuck a chord in my heart. And the last piece, and this is something I really want you to dive into, was you have the arc, the monomyth of like a Greek story of a hero. There's a boy, and then he's met with a challenge, and then he reaches a mentor and meets his climax and meets his ultimate destiny at the end of the story. And that was like in Greek literature, they really dug into that. And the
Yeah.
importance of having the right mentor at the right
Yes.
time. And I feel like many people don't have that anymore.
Yeah.
For me, I was fortunate that my wrestling coach Nico Travakos was that mentor of someone who honed in discipline of it's not about being the smartest, the fastest. It's about outworking yourself and the person beside you and to leave the rest to what it is.
Yeah.
And that was that person for me. But for you, it really seemed like this person you met in this cellular space, you're doing well,
Yeah.
and you meet this guy who takes you to there. I want you to dive in a little bit more on education may or may not be a must for careers, but do you feel like having the right mentor is a must? And what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I love the dissection and hitting that on the head. Um, so I think there's not enough people in this world that identify that they may be actually mentoring someone and the impact that they have on them, and the power, essentially not like power and like, oh, I have power to destroy this person or raise them up, but just just influence over someone to direct them, bad or good. um and so I think that mentorship sometime I think it is really critical. Like, and I think if we could make more people aware to try to find a mentor or understand what a mentor is, um, even if it's in high school, right, or just out of high school or in college or whatever, like seek a mentor. I think is a really good thing, because it's just an opportunity to get a different perspective. It's someone that you can lean on that's maybe, unbiased, and really, just un, open your eyes a little bit. Like, to me, I think it should be someone that's older, because to me, it's a cheat code, right? Like, I've got, let's say, 20 more years of life than you. I'm going to guess that's probably pretty accurate.
We'll call
And
it 15 and we'll
in saying, in saying that, I'll never share. In saying that, I've got 20 years more experience. And when you get to my age, you'll also have that same level of experience. But as a mentor, I can give you the cheat code, right? I can share with you, like, hey, these are my experiences. These are things that I did. What are you thinking? Can I give you some feedback on that? And so, I mean, the list goes on and on and on. I've realized through some of my years that I have mentored people. Never was told that that was the title, or the reason for our conversation. Was never asked to be a mentor, but in reflection, I realized, oh my goodness, like this person's always coming to me, and it's not just about work, and it's not just about getting coached or about sales. It's like, hey, I'm thinking about this, or I'm thinking about this, or I'm trying to buy a house, or thinking about having kids. And so in reflection, it was like, oh, I guess maybe I was a mentor. But nowadays, I'm more formalized as a mentor. There's a different program within the organization I work for that kind of deems you as a mentor. And I've started mentoring people more structurally. But I also think as the mentor, it doesn't need to be hard. Like, you don't have to bring up like loose conversation just to bring up loose conversation. I think it just can be simple, and just being an ear for someone, and throwing some perspectives and questioning. So yeah, long story short, to answer your question, I think everybody should have a mentor. I really do. Life is also pretty tough, right? It's not easy. We all go through a lot of different things, and again, to maybe just get an outside perspective or just have someone else's ear from time to time when you need it, can can never can never be a bad thing.
One of the things you really mentioned was that cheat code. And I
Yeah,
want to use that to kind of reel into sort of this topic of careers and things like that because you mentioned it of like, especially somebody significantly older. And it struck something where I was in this company and there's this guy, Craig Snellgrove. Like, man, this guy was a man after my heart. Like, he may not know me, but I know him like really well. This guy was
hmm,
a head honcho and he was very different and the way he approached people when it came to newcomers. So I remember I was just a newbie and it was a training. We were in head office, and this guy, he begins this is in the rental automotive industry. This
got
guy
it.
starts his day at 4 a.m., goes to one store and cleans a car, cleans one car with wash bay guys. That's how he begins his day because he began like his origins is nuts. He like went to Guelph, Ontario. He's studying in the University of Guelph. Didn't really know what he wanted to do. Started cleaning cars in this company and worked his way up to like one of like the VPs in like the U.S. Crazy,
Love it.
unreal story nowadays, right? I mean, those stories are
Yeah,
so few and far between. But he was
yeah,
one of those guys where he never wanted to forget his origin. So he'd begin his day cleaning a car. Then, like, whenever there was any newcomers in his division, he always met with them and took us out for lunch and had conversations
love it.
with us. And just, he's a really dynamic guy and he was always on. If he hosted a gathering, he was the first there and the last one to leave. So you saw these things. And I remember I was just in such awe of him. I was like, guys,
Yeah,
how does Craig Snellgrove do this? He's got a wife and kid. He's older than me and I'm tired. Like I want to go home and sleep. How's this guy out partying us? And he
yeah,
mentions like one of my managers at the time. He's like, "Listen, that's what old school business used to be.
yeah.
Sorry for my daughter in the background.
All good.
Old school business used to be, managers used to open their homes and invite people over for like Friday night meals, and it was more than just hey, we work here. It's like hey, this is my wife and kid, come in, and you would very much
Yeah,
welcome them in, and
love it.
ever since I started seeing and hearing that, I've started to slowly apply that in my day to day. We're like, you know what? Who's a colleague I can invite over? Who can I open
Mm,
this up to? Because it's very easy for us to be like, oh, listen, careers are one thing, life is important elsewhere. But and this is something we can kind of divert next to is how important careers actually are, because this is where we spend most of our lives, really 40 hours a week. So to spend 40 hours in a week for a place that doesn't matter to me doesn't sit right with me as a human being. And
yes.
I was always one of those people where if it was in high school, it's like, well, people are going to forget you after high school. It's like, well, not I. I don't want to be that guy that forgot someone after high school. I don't want to be that guy where we worked with someone, met someone, and they were so great and you just let it slip through for the sake of slipping through, and vice
Yeah,
versa. So
yeah,
sort of touching on that mentorship of seeing what practices were 20 years ago and starting to hold on to those
yes.
core values and principles, I think is so elemental
Yep,
in shaping the future of what businesses will be, right? Because we're
yep,
all becoming very apathetic and very siloed and do this and go home. But when you speak to real mentors, it's like, oh, this is kind of how we used to do things back in
yep.
the day. And you take what you can and you leave the rest. But
Yeah, yeah, big
yeah,
time.
so I guess I'd hand it over to you then. On that note of careers importance, you're a father, you've got a family, you do all these things.
Yep,
You love what you do. So when you love
yep,
what you do, you never work a day in your life. But also your kid
correct.
is your whole heart, and you want to give them
Yes.
your whole undivided time. So I guess I would end it there where it's what is your dichotomy between the importance of career and everything around career, Jason, and Jason on who he is as a person.
Yeah, like, uh, it's you're absolutely right. Like everything I do is for my family, right? And so, um, and for me, yeah, like when you have a career, um, it doesn't feel like work, right? You're just in it, you love it, you're in it to win it. You work hard, you play hard, and I think that's important because, as you said, you know, minimum 40 hours a week, depending on the role.
Oh,
And, and there's the pendulum swing because, and this kind of goes into work life harmony. As much as your priorities and what you do and the striving within your career to be the best and get the next level and all that stuff for your family or whatever your it is, um, sometimes it's a little bit of a slippery slope too, where you're putting your all in, and maybe you are working 50 hours a week and 60 hours a week and 70 hours a week, and now the thing that you're doing it for um, can also be a little bit of a hindrance, that career drive. So I think it's a really it's really really important to love what you do, deem it as your career, where you're super super comfortable and happy and you can see yourself doing it for the next 25 years. But just remember what you're doing it for, right, in the end, and don't let the two, one should not overcome the other one, because there will be a sacrifice. Find the harmony between the two, and you got yourself in a really good place and probably a really good career.
no, I love that, man. I love the what is my what is my why? Because to your
Yeah.
point, I laugh when you say minimum 40 hours a week,
you know
depending on time of year too.
but when you love it, it's like, hey, I'm supposed to be off at 5 or 6 or whatever, and when it hits 8, you're probably not complaining about it, right? You're just
No,
like,
definitely
got
not.
it done,
Not in the
got it
way
done.
that a job would be. Like if you're, I remember
Correct.
working at a store and it's like the holiday rush and like it's like
Yeah.
you closed 2 hours ago, but there's one person still browsing and you're like, please hurry up. But if it's a different way where you're trying to get something done and it's like 8 p.m. and you finally got it through, there's a sense of like victory. Like
Yes.
on the
Yes.
note of working late one night and where I felt great about it was I had to work on something and I was thinking about it in my head. I was like, how am I going to bring this to life? And when I presented to my leadership, I was like, listen, this took me 3 days and 4 showers to do. And because it was very much like I left work, but it was in the back of my mind. I'm showering, I'm
Yeah.
thinking about it. I'm like, man, like, how's it going to come to life? And it boom, and it hit. And then I remember one night, it just took me until about 8 p.m. to get it done. But I
Yep.
didn't even think about where the hours were. It was just, how can I really make this look great? And that was like the biggest moment when I learned that this is a career, because when you have a job, do a good job or bad job, you get paid. When you do a career, it's a bit more than just doing a good job or bad job. Is did you do enough for yourself where you feel like, man, whether
Yeah.
someone else sees it that way or not, different
Yep.
story. And those are different
Yep.
conversations for different times. But for
Yep.
you to go to bed being like, man, today I gave it my all, and I can take pride in that. I won't lose sleep
Yep.
over the outcome of this. And that was what I think when we kind of chatted, that's what prompted me. That was the first realization of, man, I'm finally in a career. This is
Love it. Love it. Love it. Yeah. That's so good. That's so good. Well, that's awesome. You know, um, this was a lot of fun,
Absolutely.
Hassan. Again, it's again. I think it's like a couple months before it's been a year that we've got to connect, and um, would love to do it again. If you're open to it,
Absolutely.
and I think
Anytime.
it would. Yeah, I think it would be a lot of fun. I mean, there's a lot of things that we can unpack. But really, really, really appreciate you joining me tonight, and yeah, definitely cannot wait for next conversations for sure.
Absolutely, Jason. Thank you very much for welcoming me into your space and into your thoughts. I guess it's always a pleasure to hear you, and absolutely, man. Until next time, this will not be a one and done for sure. So I really appreciate this, man. Truly.
Love it, love it. Thanks, Hassan.
Cheers.